Hi guys, I'm Shmee. Hello and welcome back to the channel where today we are having one of my periodic What's Next updates. We have a lot that we need to talk about. Things like cars departing, upcoming trips to the US, new arrivals and cars that are going to be joining the collection. But talking about new cars, over the last 15 months or so, since moving here to the Shmuseum, the collection has grown by a double-digit figure of cars, and sadly it does mean that I need to let a few go. And I want to run through that a little bit more with you today, think about what, when, where and why, but also to discuss inbound arrivals, when the Zenvo will touch down here, the GT500 arriving from the US, my new Lotus Emira. We'll talk about Petrolheadonism Live, where I'm going to be taking quite a few of the Shmeemobiles to see some of you guys, and of course running through the plans with the Mercedes AMG GT Black Series, which remember is over in the United States, ready for a big tour that I've got planned, driving it coast to coast, and I cannot wait for that, so stay tuned for a little bit more on that front. But let's have this complete update then. What's next? I still think it is ridiculously cool to have this lineup of the cars on the Benpack Auto Stackers. We've got 16 of the cars here in the main hall at the moment. There are 3 more tucked into the back part of the Shmuseum, and there are actually 6 Shmeemobiles that are currently absent for various things, which is often the case, whether that's cars in transport somewhere, away for service, having some work done, whatever it might be. But obviously pull all of those back, lift up these, and you've got that brightly colourful 2-tiered lineup of cars, which is insane. But I want to talk about something that was said by Damon from Daily Driven Exotics recently. He said, surprise, surprise, I'm not as rich to just go and buy whatever I want, whenever I want, and sometimes to bring a new car to the channel means that something has to go on the chopping block. Now, he was talking about his Lamborghini Diablo, but I think there are a lot of parallels here, especially with the recent arrival of the Zenvo, which is of course by far the most valuable car I have ever purchased, and certainly means I need to rein things in a little bit, and that's what I want to talk about today. Now, if we rewind back to moving here to the Shmuseum, it was only 15 months ago, just over a year. I can't believe how quickly that time has gone. But to list out all of the cars that have joined the collection in those 15 months, well, it's been more than 1 per month, and we need to just quickly recap those. So after moving in, it was the AMG GT Black Series. Shortly after that was the Aston Martin V8 Vantage Roadster, the original Shmeemobile that I bought back. Then the C63 AMG Black Series, the Lamborghini Huracan STO. We then picked up the original Clio, right, remember that, like my first ever car. After that was the Ferrari GT C4 V12, Aston Martin DBS, Ferrari SF90 Stradale, then it was the Clio V6, the Mercedes-Benz E500 Estate, and lastly the Zenvo TSR-S as the cars that I've purchased. But also in this time, we had the Audi RS3 Saloon Long-Termer, the Mini Cooper S Electric, the Cupra Formentor, the Cupra Born, and even the newly arrived on the Shmuseum channel Ford Transit Custom MSRT. That's 16 cars in 15 months, which is a little bit silly, I'm not going to lie. Now, we have had some cars that have departed the collection in the same time. We had the Taycan, the G63, the GR Yaris, the M3, the GTR Pro, and I'm sure something else, the 718 GT4, and a couple of others, no doubt. But obviously, with the amount of expenditure on new cars, and you can probably add it up yourself with cars like the GT Black Series, the STO, the SF90, and the Zenvo, with the biggest car that's departed being the GTR Pro, I kind of need to be a little bit sensical about this. Obviously, the team has grown. We're now about 10 people, including those who are working part-time with everything to do with the channel, and certainly the expenditure of this place as well. So I need to be realistic, and it does mean that some cars have to go. I had originally thought when I purchased the SF90 that one of the more expensive cars might have to depart. That obviously never happened, but it means something from, let's say, the Senna, the GT, the STO, the SF90, the SLS Black, or the GT Black is going to have to leave. More on that in a moment. To quickly run over the missing cars, the 6 cars that are not here right now, and the first of those is one I am super excited to drive for the first time ever, my Renault Clio V6, the car that we bought in a not so running order state that's been repainted in acid yellow and is now only a week or so away from having the engine back in and being good to go, and I'm looking forward to that one a lot. Then we have the Shelby GT500. Now, I know a lot of you are wondering about this. It's been quite a while since I boxed it up in Florida to bring it over to the UK. There have been tons of shipping delays, but it's only going to be a couple more weeks, and then we'll be able to see it and go through the process to register it here. Going the other way was my AMG GT Black Series, which is over in the United States. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. We have the Zenvo, which after Supercar Owners Circle in Croatia, I sent back to the factory in Denmark to have its oil change service, and basically for the team to give it a full inspection. That's kind of normal with cars like this, especially when they've been running fairly hard. They're bespoke, hand-built machines, immense power, and I wanted to make sure that everything's in tip-top shape. That should be here really quite soon as well. We have the SLS Black Series, which is away at Cambridge Car Audio, just having the audio fine-tuned. That's only a couple of days before it will return back home. I've definitely missed one. A quick think what it might be. Which car is absent? Yes, the GT R Roadster. The GT R Roadster is currently off for sale, so hopefully that will find a new home in the not too distant future as well. Now, the reason I'm mentioning the cars is that I am going to be at Petrolheadonism live at Nebworth House on the 24th and 25th of September for that weekend with the biggest lineup of Shmeemobiles that I have ever taken to an event. It's going to be at least 8, if not 9, 10, maybe even more of the cars, hopefully as many of them that can arrive here as possible. If the Zenvo is back, it will be there. If the Clio V6 is ready, it will be there. I think the GT500 is just going to miss out, but certainly some of the others that you see around, the likes of the Senna, the Ford GT, the SF90, the STO, and I can't wait to meet some of you guys there. I'm going to be around for the whole weekend to say hello. If you catch me, we'll be talking cars pretty much non-stop throughout. Really looking forward to that. It looks set to be a great event at Petrolheadonism Live. Talking about what's missing, quite a few of the current absentees are actually the citrus-coloured cars of the lineup, the GT500 in Grabber Lime, the Clio V6 in Acid Yellow, the GT Black Series in Solar Beam, and the inbound Lotus Emira in Hethel Yellow. But in their place, we do have this, as you might have seen, the Ford Transit Custom from MSRT in Lemon Fire, which is very, very bright. In fact, nearly as bright as the Lotus Elise. And talking about the Elise, of course, there have been a few other cars over the last year and a bit, which have come from various friends that have stayed here for a while. Max's Jag XJ220, the Lotus Elise Cup 250 Final Edition. We also had the old 911, we had the Gunther Works, and we had the Novitec 812 GTS, amongst a few others that have popped in here and there. So lots of different cars have come and gone over this time, but I also mentioned the Emira. Now, original expectations were that the Emira would be here back in April or May of this year. It pushed back in towards June, July, then it was September, but we're now most of the way through September, and I don't really know when exactly it's going to arrive, but hopefully very soon, because if early impressions are anything to go by from the quick drive that I had, that's going to be a brilliant car, and I really can't wait to spend some time behind the wheel of it. We've got the GT500 I did just discuss a little bit about, but remember when I dropped it off, it was then loaded into a container. The container then has to go onto a cargo ship. The cargo ship schedules can be a little bit sporadic in terms of when it gets loaded and then where it goes and how long it sits in various ports. And I've been tracking the shipment of that and seeing where it's gone and just getting really frustrated because it's taken a long time, but you have no control over these things. If you want to do it quickly, you send a car by air, but air freight right now is so expensive, it's just not something that's feasible. For example, sending the GT Black Series to the US by air would be in the region, get this, one way, of about $40,000. By ship, a little bit more than 10. So the difference is huge. Even shipping a car is hugely expensive to begin with, massively more so than it was a couple of years ago. And in fact, even going in opposite directions makes a big difference. It's way more expensive to go to the US than it has been to bring the GT500 home, which has been about, I think, $4,000 or $5,000, just to give you a comparison behind that. When it arrives here and we get to go and see it, I think being unboxed, being removed and taken out of the container, that will kickstart the process to get it registered. I can't immediately just go and drive it here in the UK. And the fun thing is, it's still completely covered in the Gumball 3000 livery, which is just going to look really cool to see that again. But basically, it has to be taken to My Car Import, where it will then go through the conversions. A few things that have to be done. For example, you can't have the red tail lights here. They have to be amber. You have to adjust a few other things around the car to make sure that it can be registered and go through the individual vehicle approval process, basically, to then put a number plate on it, to get the documents back, to pay the fees and the taxes. Obviously, I've also got to pay the VAT, the duty, and the customs clearance fees and all of that as well. That process probably takes about 3 or 4 weeks from when it arrives here. So it should be here at the very end of the month, but it will probably be another month after that before I can actually go out and drive it. One of my favorite adventures ever was when I took the Ford GT over to the United States. The amount of fun with that car. Of course, more recently at the start of last year, I bought the GT500 out in Florida and drove that coast to coast as well, but it is soon time for the adventures with the GT Black Series. Now, one of the coolest things about collecting the GT Black Series out in the US when I get there before too long is that it will be the third continent I've driven that car on. Having had it here in the UK and around Europe a bit, over to the Nürburgring in Germany, we then of course flew it to the Middle East, drove it in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, even doing some laps at Yas Marina. It's then come back to the UK briefly to be at the Goodwood Festival of Speed before it's gone over to the United States ahead of this journey that I want to tell you about now. The plan is that I'm going to be collecting it up in the Northeast, in the New York area. I'll go from New York up into Canada, hopefully back to Toronto, because the start of the Gumball happened so quickly. I can't wait to get back to Toronto. Then it'll be a case of meandering back down across the US towards Texas with a few stops around Ohio, around Tail of the Dragon. That's a road I really want to drive, in through Tennessee, across to Texas. Then from there, I think to Arizona before going up to SEMA in Las Vegas, maybe some stops in Utah, and then over to California as part of, let's say, part one of the journey with the car, the first month or so. Then I'll come back a little bit later, maybe in the new year, to do a bit more around California and possibly come all the way back over down towards Florida to wrap things up for that GT Black Series tour. This is something I'm super excited about. We will be posting any news and updates about various meeting points along the way, but obviously there are going to be some epic things and some amazing videos that I can't wait to share with you while driving the GT Black Series even more miles. The car, I think, has done, it's in the region of 5,500 miles, so about 8,000 or so kilometers. That's probably going to double, if not more, during this visit to the USA. But that's what the car is for. It's for driving, and I want to enjoy the GT Black Series so much because it's a car I feel completely attached to, having been involved in the whole process, seeing the car before it was out there, and obviously the launch piece behind it, having taken it to the Middle East, now taking it to the USA, and having driven it so much on so many legendary circuits as well. So that's going to be kicking off in the mid-early part of October, so stay tuned for more updates on that front. I think this brings us on to the part of what is going to go. And believe me, if I could, I would be keeping every single car that joins the collection with the memories, the storylines, all of the videos. But sadly, that's not the reality of the world. And I think that brings us back to what Damon said earlier. With a few big arrivals over the last year and with a few things in the works for the future, plus of course being here at the Shmuseum, and I've mentioned before, this is a very expensive undertaking. In fact, the Shmuseum probably costs me per year, including salaries, upkeep, taxes, etc., in the region of, well, approaching that of something like the STO. It's a big outlay, and obviously the Zenvo, even on finance, has required a deposit of, to use the STO again, more than the STO on the deposit of the finance. So I do need to shuffle things around, and with the 296 GTS down the line, and with a few other projects that I'd like to get involved in, you know, the Clio V6 has really whet the appetite of myself and the guys to do a few other things like that, to try and find cars that we can almost bring back from the dead and make something truly special, some more modern, rarer, exciting stuff, some of the stuff that I really looked up to when I was a little bit younger as well. So that's the plan in the near future. So do keep expecting some surprises and things you might not currently know about to pop up on the channel. But as I said, it does mean that something from the more expensive side is going to have to give. I don't want to ever sell my Ford GT. The SLS Black Series is super personal to me, and I'm really enjoying driving the SF90 Stradale. Obviously the GT Black Series is over in the US, which means we don't have many choices to currently go through. It probably has to be one of the STO or the Senna, or at least a combination of other cars. In fact, talking other cars, I am going to sell the Aston Martin DBS, and I did vaguely allude to that, I think a couple of months ago, that I wasn't really feeling completely gelled with the car, and perhaps it's surplus to requirements, maybe even the Lusso. I don't know. Basically, I need to have a little bit more thought, but I do need to let a few cars go because the Zenvo is a hugely expensive machine. In fact, it's more than the Senna and the GT put together. It's obviously the STO plus the SLS plus the GT plus the SF90. So you have to think of it as that's arrived along with actually all of those that arrived in the last year or so. And I want to be a little bit aware of obviously where we are with everything at the moment in the world. Obviously I have expenses, salaries. I want to keep all of my team able to keep going. I want to make sure that we keep everything in check. And that is a big important topic, because obviously bills and expenses of travel and even electricity and all of that all shooting up. So just being aware and keeping a mind eye. You've got to look ahead. You've got to plan ahead. That's part of running a business, as Damon often talks about. And as much as the cars are very emotionally led for me, very personally led, there is of course the sanity checking that needs to be done all around it. So alas, this means that something does need to depart. I suppose in some ways I'm open to offers if somebody out there is interested in, I'm not going to say anything because not everything is for sale, but just hit me up with a DM somewhere and we'll see and talk about it from there. But yeah, something's going to have to give. And before you ask, no, I am not making the mistake of selling the V8 Vantage Roadster again. That is permanently permanent, full stop. Another thing, by the way, the last year, I've been trying to think a little bit about the upkeep of these kind of cars because the costs are really very high, and it's something perhaps to talk about in a bit more detail. But after having the complete refurbishment works to this car, which was about £10,000 worth or so, all of the work to the SLS Black Series, which was into 5 figures, over £15,000 worth of work being done to that car in total. We've also had the Clio V6, which has been another £15,000 worth or so in total to bring that car back, plus all of the other servicing and maintenance, tyres, general wear and tear and things that have needed to be done, especially with the McLarens, obviously cars that are out of warranty. It's been quite an expensive 2022 in terms of car maintenance. I think probably maybe even £75,000 worth of different things being done. So it all adds up at the end of the day. It's all something that obviously one has to consider and think about. And luckily, a lot of these cars have appreciated in value in a big way. Things like the SLS Black Series, as I discussed on the recent tour that I did with the car. Obviously, the Ford GT holds incredibly high value. Some things like the Senna have softened. The SF90 has softened. That's below its new price in terms of value. But to be honest, when it comes to these cars, I enjoy driving them. I enjoy filming these videos and sharing the experience with you. That's a big part of what it's about for me. There'll always be in the back of the mind, what's the car doing in terms of value? I think unless you're a billionaire, you can't stop thinking about that. It's always going to be relevant to some extent, especially with costs like insurance. You know, my insurance is significantly more than that outright every year, just to put it into perspective. It's more like a DBS every year. So all of these things do add up a lot, and having grown the collection so much, it's certainly doubled in value since moving here. So taking on the costs of being here, plus the costs to do with the cars, as much as I'd love to be carried away, this is basically the moment of letting you know that we need to put it back a bit more into check and say farewell to a couple of the cars. So it's going to be a bit of a decision-making process now to decide exactly what is going to depart. But I do want to take a positive from this, that we're going to be doing a lot more cool stuff. Plus, the cars that are on the horizon. As I've mentioned, I would love a G63 4x4 squared if they become available in the UK. The Morgan Super 3 will be at some point early into next year. We've got the 296 GTS a little bit further down the line. And there might be some other things I haven't mentioned yet. There might be. They usually are. So stay tuned for a little bit more about that down the line as well. I think that's more or less it for now. Obviously exciting times ahead with the GT500 touching down here, the Zenvo arriving here, the GT Black Series tour in the US, the Clio V6 being ready on the road, and the things I've just mentioned for the future, even if it means shaking things up a little bit. Plus, there might be some other, let's say, guest cars arriving here, which will feature prominently on the channel down the line too. That's it for now though. Thank you very much guys for all of your support over the last month or two. It has been surreal for me, especially August, from things like driving the Huayra BC, the Apollo E, the Huayra R, the AMG 1, driving on some incredible circuits, going to Car Week, going to Supercar Owners Circle, taking delivery of the Zenvo. My mind is blown by what this has been like, even though it's nearly 13 years into the Shmee150 channel now, with on average more than 1 video per day across the Shmee150 channel and the Shmuseum channel. It's still so exceptionally exciting, and I want to thank all of you for being part of this and making it all possible. I can't thank you enough for everything. For now though, that is all, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheers!